It began with a wrongful arrest and ended with a city's rebirth. General Caldwell's quiet strength against injustice didn't just clear his name, it awakened a movement. What started as one man standing firm became a blueprint for hope, unity, and lasting reform. If this story touched your heart and inspired you, press 1 to show your support. If you want to see even more improvements, press 0 and tell us what you'd like. And remember, subscribe to our channel to follow more powerful journeys like this. Officer Scott Ramsay cruised the neighborhood, bored and restless. His boredom ended when he spotted a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. Suspicious, he turned on his lights and pulled it over. Inside the SUV sat General Samuel Bryant, a decorated U.S. Army officer with over 30 years of service, dressed casually in a polo shirt and khakis. Calm and deliberate, Bryant retrieved his license. Ramsay approached aggressively, tapping hard on the window. Bryant lowered it and greeted him politely. "License and registration," Ramsay barked, ignoring basic courtesy. Bryant complied, hands visible on the wheel. Scanning the SUV suspiciously, Ramsay asked, "What brings you to this neighborhood?" "I'm heading to a veterans meeting." "I'll be speaking there tonight," Bryant answered steadily. Ramsay smirked. "A meeting, huh? And what's your role there?" "I'm a U.S. Army general," Bryant replied calmly. Ramsay scoffed. "A general? And I'm the governor. Step out of the car." Bryant, sensing the tension, asked why, but Ramsay's hand hovered near his gun. "Because I said so," he snapped. Bryant complied, moving carefully. Ramsay aggressively patted him down and questioned him again. "You don't look like you belong here." "I belong wherever I choose," Bryant responded firmly. Ramsay, irritated, gripped his arm and led him to the back of the SUV. A small crowd gathered, phones recording. A concerned woman, Karen, approached. "Officer, he doesn't seem like he's causing trouble," she said. Ramsay barked, "Step back, Mom." "Official police business." Karen noticed a military ID badge on the dashboard and hesitated but retreated under Ramsay's glare. Ramsay handcuffed Bryant. "You're under arrest for resisting an officer," he declared. Bryant stayed calm. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. Ramsay sneered. "The only mistake here is thinking you can talk your way out." As Ramsay led him toward the patrol car, a voice from the crowd shouted, "Do you even know who he is?" Ramsay ignored the comment and shoved Bryant into the backseat. He radioed the station, saying, "Bringing in a suspect who claims he's a big-shot Army general. We'll see about that." Bryant sat silently, his expression unreadable. A man who had dedicated his life to service was now treated like a criminal, not for his actions, but for his appearance. As the patrol car pulled away, the crowd filmed everything. Those videos would soon spread and ignite a firestorm across the city and the nation. The ride was tense and silent. Bryant, hands cuffed behind him, sat upright, his dignity intact despite the humiliation. In the mirror, Ramsay sneered, "Not much to say now, huh?" Bryant calmly replied, "Plenty to say, officer. But I'll wait for the right time." Ramsay rolled his eyes, dismissing Bryant as just another man who needed to be put in his place. But Bryant was already preparing for what lay ahead. At the station, Ramsay yanked open the door and motioned Bryant out. As they walked in, officers paused, sensing something was different about this man. The calm authority didn't fit Ramsay's story. At the booking desk, a young officer, Simmons, barely looked up. "Name?" he asked. Before Bryant could answer, Ramsay cut in. "Claims he's some big Army general. Probably just another con artist." Bryant finally spoke, his voice steady. "Samuel Bryant, U.S. Army general." Simmons froze, eyes wide. "Wait, General Samuel Bryant, sir?" Ramsay scoffed, but Simmons ignored him, standing up quickly. "General, why are you in cuffs?" Ramsay snapped. He resisted and acted suspiciously. Simmons looked between them, alarm growing. "Do you even know who this man is?" "He's a national figure." Ramsay sneered. "Everyone's important when they get caught." The commotion drew Sergeant Teresa Grant, a tough, no-nonsense leader. She demanded, "What's going on?" Simmons quickly explained. Grant's eyes narrowed at Ramsay. "You arrested him for driving slow? In a nice neighborhood?" Turning to Bryant, she apologized. "General, I'm so sorry. This is unacceptable." She immediately unlocked the cuffs. Bryant rubbed his wrists, faint red marks visible. "Thank you, Sergeant. I want this incident properly documented." Grant nodded firmly. "Absolutely, sir." Ramsay protested. "With all due respect, Sergeant, he didn't cooperate. He looked out of place. Grant shot him a sharp look. Your job is to serve and protect, not to act on bias. You've embarrassed this department. Officers around them murmured, tension thick in the air. Grant ordered Simmons to escort Bryant to her office, away from the crowd. Ramsay stood frozen, his arrogance replaced by doubt, while Bryant walked past officers who now couldn't meet his gaze. Ramsay shrugged, insisting he was just doing his job. Grant gave him a steely glare, reminding him that his job was to enforce the law fairly, not harass innocent people. Ramsay rolled his eyes, saying he didn't know who Bryant was and questioned why Bryant didn't announce himself. Grant's voice turned sharp, because he shouldn't have to. Whether a general, a teacher, or anyone else, no one deserves to be treated like a criminal without cause. She reminded Ramsay that Bryant was one of the most respected military leaders in the country, a man who served across the globe and advised presidents. Yet Ramsay cuffed him for looking out of place. Ramsay's face reddened. He muttered that he couldn't have known. Grant snapped that the ID was in his hand, he never even checked it. Ramsay shifted uncomfortably, asking, "So what now?" Grant, incredulous, said, "Now we deal with the fallout. The general wants a full report, and this won't end here. Do you realize the damage you've caused?" Ramsay finally seemed to grasp the weight of his mistake. Meanwhile, in Grant's office, General Bryant calmly filled out his statement. Officer Simmons, nervous but respectful, assisted him. As Bryant typed, his phone buzzed. Major General Banks was calling. Banks asked if he was okay. Bryant replied he was fine but intended to pursue accountability. Banks assured him the Pentagon was already aware and the media would soon follow. Bryant ended the call, knowing the fight for justice wasn't over. He was determined to use his voice to demand real change, starting with the Riverton Police Department. At the same time, a video of the arrest had already gone viral. A bystander had uploaded footage showing Ramsay's aggressive behavior against Bryant's calm dignity. Hashtags like Justice for Bryant and racial profiling trended rapidly. News outlets picked up the story. Outrage flooded the department's phones and social media, and Sergeant Grant's phone buzzed non-stop under the growing pressure for accountability. In Grant's office, the sergeant apologized. Bryant calmly said he wanted a full report and accountability, not just for himself but for others without his platform. Grant promised her full support. Outside, Ramsay realized whispers were spreading. His mistake was bigger than he thought. Grant called everyone to attention and ordered Ramsay into her office. He defensively claimed he was doing his job. Grant sharply reminded him that his job was to protect, not profile. Ramsay muttered he didn't know who Bryant was. Grant cut him off. Respect wasn't based on titles. Bryant's ID had been right in his hand, but Ramsay hadn't even looked. When Ramsay asked what now, Grant said the fallout was just beginning. Meanwhile, Bryant wrote his statement. Major General Banks called, assuring him the Pentagon was aware and support was behind him. Bryant knew this fight for justice was far from over. Bryant set his phone down with a sigh, knowing his fight for justice was far from over. Determined to drive real change, he focused on holding the Riverton Police Department accountable. Meanwhile, a bystander's video of his arrest went viral, showing Bryant's calm against Ramsay's aggression. Hashtags like Justice for Bryant and racial profiling trended fast, and public outrage flooded the station with calls and demands. Ramsay, isolated and shaken, saw the viral video and realized his mistake too late. The department plunged into crisis, and Sergeant Grant ordered everyone to stay professional as the station faced national scrutiny. Grant confronted Ramsay, furious at his reckless actions, and warned him that an internal investigation was already underway, and he would face consequences. In a conference room, General Bryant met with his attorney and a Pentagon official. Though released without charges, Bryant made it clear this wasn't just about him, it was about stopping systemic injustice. With strong legal and military support behind him, he vowed to ensure real accountability and lasting change. Outside the station, protesters gathered with signs demanding justice for Bryant and an end to racial profiling. The crowd grew rapidly, fueled by social media and news coverage. Activists called for police reform, and the streets echoed with chants for change. Inside, officers watched nervously as tensions rose. Later, Ramsay was summoned by Chief Carter, who coldly suspended him without pay, citing misconduct and a betrayal of public trust. Ramsay, humiliated, surrendered his badge and gun, realizing his career was crumbling. As protests intensified, media coverage captured a community united against injustice. Sergeant Grant watched grimly, knowing the department faced a long, difficult road ahead. At home, Bryant watched too, recognizing this was only the beginning of a much larger movement. The next morning, Bryant stood before reporters at City Hall. Calm and commanding, he spoke about systemic injustice, calling for reforms and accountability not just for himself but for everyone. His powerful speech spread nationwide, igniting further calls for change. At the Pentagon, senior leaders, led by Major General Banks, condemned the incident and pledged full support for Bryant, urging an independent review of the Riverton Police Department. A national reckoning had begun, and there would be no turning back. Bryant's military service made his mistreatment even more outrageous. In Riverton, his speech united the community, swelling protests and sparking town hall meetings for real reform. Activists like Naomi Grant emphasized that the fight was bigger than one officer, it was about systemic change. Meanwhile, Officer Ramsay became a public disgrace, facing condemnation from the media, his peers, and even his wife, who confronted him for his actions. At the Riverton Police Department, Sergeant Grant worked nonstop to contain the fallout, urging immediate reforms including bias training and greater oversight. Chief Carter agreed, knowing trust had to be rebuilt. At home, Bryant watched the protests with his wife, determined to keep the momentum alive and fight for lasting change. The next day, the department launched an internal investigation into Ramsay. Detective Naomi Rhodes, known for her integrity, led the review. As she dug through Ramsay's record, a disturbing pattern of past misconduct and racial bias complaints surfaced, revealing the deeper failures of the system that had shielded him for far too long. Detective Rhodes questioned Ramsay, who struggled to justify stopping General Bryant. Rhodes pressed hard, pointing out his history of racial bias complaints. Body cam footage confirmed Bryant had remained calm, exposing Ramsay's actions as baseless. Rhodes recommended termination, warning that the department needed deep reforms. Meanwhile, the community rallied stronger than ever. At a town hall, residents shared painful stories of profiling. Bryant spoke passionately, vowing to fight alongside them. Ramsay, suspended and disgraced, faced public shame and isolation. Even his wife admitted his actions had brought their family ruin. By week's end, Chief Carter announced Ramsay's termination at a packed press conference. It was a Samuel Y for accountability, but Bryant and the community knew it was only the beginning. Energized, they formed a coalition to demand real, lasting reform in Riverton. At a packed community center, Bryant told residents that Ramsay was just the start they needed to change the system. Activists called for independent oversight, mandatory body cameras, and bias training. Bryant stressed it was about rebuilding trust, not just policies. The coalition finalized their demands, and Bryant vowed to deliver them to the city council. At the council meeting, Bryant spoke firmly, insisting justice and accountability were not optional. Though some officials resisted, Bryant countered that true protection meant fairness for everyone. His speech stirred strong support from the crowd. Inside the police department, reactions were mixed. Some officers welcomed reform, others resented it. Sergeant Grant made it clear good officers had nothing to fear. Change was coming, whether they liked it or not. The coalition's push worked. The council approved an oversight board and new reforms. Protests gave way to community forums, signaling a slow but real shift. Bryant reminded everyone, policies were only as strong as those who upheld them. Meanwhile, Ramsay, jobless and isolated, struggled with regret. As Riverton moved forward, Bryant reflected on his journey. Sitting with his wife, he knew this fight wasn't his alone, it belonged to the whole community. As evening fell, Bryant felt a renewed sense of purpose. In Riverton, protests had evolved into real action, and the reforms he and the coalition fought for were taking shape. The new independent oversight board held its first meeting, with Bryant reminding members that their work would set a precedent far beyond the city. The board made the findings on Officer Ramsay public, revealing a long history of racial profiling and departmental failures. Community praise grew, but inside the department, uncomfortable conversations began as officers who once ignored misconduct were now under scrutiny. Ramsay's life spiraled downward. Rejected everywhere, he received a letter from Officer Simmons urging him to confront his biases. For the first time, Ramsay considered that change might start with himself. The Riverton Police Department rolled out bias training and body cameras, with Sergeant Grant leading the charge to rebuild trust. Her honest leadership began shifting the department's culture, conversation by conversation. Meanwhile, General Bryant's influence expanded nationwide. Speaking at conferences and advising cities, he became a symbol of resilience and ongoing accountability, reminding everyone that real reform demands constant vigilance. The community began feeling the effects of change as misconduct complaints dropped and relationships improved. Bryant attended a neighborhood barbecue, sensing the new atmosphere of trust and connection. Naomi Grant told him, "It's not perfect, but it's a start." And Bryant agreed a start was all they needed. The reforms marked a turning point. The Independent Oversight Board continued its work. Complaints were handled with transparency, and the police department issued its first annual report showing progress. Chief Carter, Sergeant Grant, and General Bryant stood together, united in their commitment to accountability. Meanwhile, Ramsay, isolated and jobless, attended a workshop on unconscious bias, beginning his path toward personal change. He realized that acknowledging his mistakes was the first step forward. Bryant's influence expanded nationally. At a policing symposium, he reminded leaders that accountability was essential for trust. In Riverton, police officers now worked hand in hand with the community, rebuilding relationships through mentorship and outreach. At a city celebration, Bryant was honored, but he made it clear this was about collective effort, not individual glory. As the sun set over Riverton, the city felt lighter, more hopeful, and ready to keep moving forward. The journey for justice was far from over, but real change had begun. 1 week later, Riverton had settled into a new rhythm. Community meetings that once centered on outrage now focused on building solutions. Police officers attended local events not out of obligation, but as true participants, slowly repairing broken trust. Bryant remained deeply involved, meeting quietly with young activists, encouraging them to lead the next wave of change. At the Riverton Police Department, small shifts were noticeable: officers speaking more carefully, listening more attentively, and approaching their roles with renewed humility. Sergeant Grant continued leading internal reforms, determined that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. Scott Ramsay, now living quietly on the outskirts of town, struggled with guilt and isolation. Though he had begun therapy, redemption felt distant. Yet somewhere deep down, for the first time, he understood true change started from within, and his journey had just begun. As for Riverton, the city was far from perfect, but a new spirit had taken hold, a stubborn, growing hope that real change wasn't just a dream anymore. It was happening, one honest conversation, one act of courage, one day at a time. 1 month later, Riverton looked different, not just on the surface but in spirit. The Oversight Board had already handled its first major case, and the public saw real consequences for misconduct. Trust, though fragile, was slowly rebuilding. Officers who embraced the reforms found new respect from the community, while those resistant to change grew quieter, pushed aside by a culture that no longer tolerated silence. General Bryant continued his work, not seeking attention but quietly mentoring new leaders who would carry the movement forward. His presence at city meetings became a symbol of steady, unwavering commitment to justice. Scott Ramsay remained absent from public life. He attended his workshops in silence, grappling with the slow and painful process of confronting the man he had been. He knew redemption, if possible, would not come easily or quickly. In Riverton's parks and streets, laughter returned. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now stopped to talk. Progress was still a daily struggle, but the city had changed, and more importantly, its people believed change was possible. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared, but now they were the foundation of something stronger, a community finally learning how to heal. 6 months later, Riverton was no longer the city it had been. New recruits at the police academy studied Riverton's reforms as a model of how accountability could rebuild trust. Community policing programs had expanded, and regular town halls ensured residents had a voice in shaping public safety. The Oversight Board, once a bold idea, had become a permanent and respected institution. General Bryant continued traveling across the country, sharing Riverton's story and reminding audiences that real change demands vigilance. Yet no matter where he went, he always returned home to a city that no longer averted its eyes from injustice, but faced it head-on. Scott Ramsay remained in quiet obscurity. He still attended counseling sessions, still wrestled with shame, but had begun volunteering at youth centers, hoping without expectation to rebuild his life piece by piece. On a warm evening in Riverton, Bryant and his wife walked through a bustling community festival. Families laughed, children played, and officers mingled freely with residents. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Bryant smiled quietly to himself, knowing the journey was far from over, but proud that together, they had proven change was possible and worth every step of the fight. Several years later, Riverton had become a symbol of resilience and transformation. Crime rates had dropped, community trust in law enforcement had steadily risen, and other cities sent delegations to learn from Riverton's reforms. What had once been a flashpoint of anger was now a model of what persistent change could achieve. General Bryant, now a national figure in justice reform, chose to retire quietly in Riverton. He spent his days mentoring young leaders, knowing the future belonged to them. His name was spoken with respect not for his rank but for his integrity and unwavering commitment to fairness. Scott Ramsay remained largely out of the public eye. He lived a modest life, working quietly with outreach programs, trying perhaps in small ways to repair what he had once helped break. Redemption was a long road, but he kept walking it, one step at a time. On a quiet evening, as Bryant walked through the city park, he watched children laugh, officers greet families, and neighbors gather without fear. Riverton wasn't perfect, and it never would be, but it was living proof that even the deepest wounds could heal when a community refused to give up. Bryant smiled, knowing their fight had mattered and always would. Note: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.